Welcome to the Mike on Much podcast. I'm your host, Mike Veerman. I'm here with my friend and trusty producer, Max Kerman, as well as our pop culture aficionado, Shane Cunningham. Guys, this is an episode of Freedom. So we have 3 topics we're going to talk about today. No guest, just our company.
No Raptors either. No Raptor stuff. It was hard to...
We are. It's one of the topics.
I guess we do. Never
We're
mind.
hitting Danny Green.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not a Raptors thing. It's more of a professional athlete, professional actor, professional entertainer, and there's sort of inclination to charge for things like autographs and photos and things like that. Yeah. That's what the story is. We're not going to go deep on the Raptors. Trust us. We're out of the woods with that, guys. Yeah, so 3 topics. Guys, like I said, no guests, just the 3 of us.
Well, and I have a movie recommendation.
Oh.
Like a pop culture thing.
Give it to us.
Have you seen the Netflix show When They See Us?
Oh, no, but Lauren saw it and said, I need to watch it.
It's the best.
And she said, yeah, it'll, break your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yes, it's about the Central Park 5 who were, now they're called the Exonerated 5 because they were basically coerced into giving confessions. Five kids who spent time in jail. And
I feel like this is really going to upset me. It's going to take me a minute to watch that one. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet. I was well aware of the case. Shane actually mentioned it to me yesterday, and I knew how Trump was intertwined with the case in the sense, because when this did happen, he was a New Yorker. Was it the 80s or 90s?
80s.
80s, yeah.
Trump sort of really came out strong against these guys, and then even after the DNA exonerated these 5 young men, Trump wouldn't back down. And then to this day, he won't back off of his sort of stance.
Yeah, like injustice and things like just being so blatantly unfair. And it really upsets me. Like, you saw Selma with me, right?
I know, yeah.
But this isn't some diamond in the rough either. Like, this has been streamed like
It'll win all
27
the
million
awards.
times. Like, it's going to do that thing where they call it a film and it gets nominated for an Oscar. And this one kid, his name's Jerome. He's like the best. In fact, he's so good. He's the only one in the series who plays his younger self and his older self. All the other kids.
Oh, so it's not a documentary. It's a film.
No, and I
recreation.
actually wanted to see the documentary. So I turn it on, and then it kind of starts off a little cheesy for the first 2 minutes, and I just shut it off. I'm like, no, I got to see the documentary. Anyway, I end up pursuing the doc, don't find it, but I find an Oprah special that's like really tells the story. I start watching the Oprah thing for 2 minutes, but then she starts saying how amazing the series is. So I'm like, fuck this, and go back to the series, and it lived up to how good Oprah said it was.
Man.
So check out Oprah also.
Okay.
She knows her shit.
Cool.
And then I watch the Oprah thing afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like we should do like movie recommendations and TV shows, just like off the top. Like
Just
that.
in general?
I think it's good.
Yeah.
I saw that movie Late Night the other night.
Oh, the
With
Mandy
Mindy
Kaling one.
I heard that's horrible.
Yeah, don't see it.
Really? Wow.
Yeah,
You
it's
saw that with
fine.
Greg?
No, I saw it with Matt Brookman.
Okay.
Yeah, my buddy.
I saw Rocket Man.
Oh yeah, what did you
I
think?
never get to see the films anymore. Go to the theater, see the pictures. But Danica and the baby were in Hamilton, and so I had like a weird like window for a matinee. So like a couple Saturdays ago,
You went solo.
I went solo.
Yeah, the Veerman brothers love going solo. You know what's interesting about that is the same director who finished
Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. He didn't start it because Bryan Singer started that movie. He also directed Rocket Man, and both LGBTQ icons, rock stars from the 70s and 80s. But Bohemian Rhapsody is good times, and it's a pretty feel good. I found Rocket Man to be so depressing. Like, it was pretty dark for like a big Hollywood movie, and I think it was rated R too, right?
It was rated R, yeah.
Yeah, and
Really?
I guess Elton John wouldn't have it any other way. He's like, I want like
What
a
did
lot
you like better?
They're both really good. I like them for different reasons, but I just thought it was interesting that the same director did both.
I think that the argument there was that they wanted to do a darker version of Bohemian Rhapsody, but the problem is the 3 guys in Queen had no interest in doing that. There was the whole thing where Sacha Baron Cohen was supposed to play Freddie Mercury. They developed the film to a certain point, and the whole joke was he told that story on Stern, where basically it's like Sacha Baron Cohen's like, and then he thinks they're at the end of the movie because Freddie dies, but the rest of the guys in Queen are like, oh no, that's only halfway. Because then they want to talk about how the band perseveres through the thing. And it's like, this is a movie about Freddie. It's not about Queen. But I think ultimately, because they wanted that PG rating on Bohemian Rhapsody to sort of pump the box office, have it be a good time, sort of paper over the fact that Freddie was homosexual and had, encounters. And they didn't want to go into that sort of like...
Too deeply.
But Freddie doesn't die halfway through, does he? I've never seen
Bohemian Rhapsody either.
Oh, okay.
But
you haven't? No, he dies kind of at the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
but this is what Sacha Baron Cohen was saying that Queen had said in the pitch meeting.
I get it.
So anyway, this was a chance where it was like, no, let's go a hard R.
Yeah.
Let's show that Elton absolutely had substance abuse problems. And like he says off the top, he was a drug addict, he was an alcoholic, and he was a sex addict.
Yeah.
And then he goes honestly into those things while also showing the sort of fantastical side of the music and what it could do to people. I thought it was like really well done in that sense.
Oh, I thought it was really well done too. And you're right that the Queen guys, you know, they controlled the narrative, and they wanted it to, like, you know, we're selling a musical, We Will Rock You. It's like, you know, they have families, and like they want to be able to take their kids to the theater. Probably, you know what I mean? And
it'll become a stage show, and you want to bring the kid and all that. And I get the inclination toward that, but I tend personally, as like a viewer, I lean more toward like, give me the, I don't know, the more raw, sort of honest sort of telling of stuff. Even though the Elton John thing, you know, it's more of a fantasy than like a sort of straight up biopic where it's like, and then this happened, and then this, you know, it's like his retelling of events through the way he
it's
perceives
very psychedelic almost. Like, did you ever watch the? You know, in Cineplex, they have the interviews with like the director and stuff.
Yeah, there's like
trailers.
Yeah,
the director is hilarious. Did you ever see what he looked like? The director of the movies, he's just like this like really kind of eccentric old British guy wearing like a really like dirty looking jacket, and he like doesn't look like he's like bathed in a few weeks. He's really just like a funny guy.
What'd you think of Taron? I can't remember his last name. Eggert?
Yeah,
the guy that played Elton John, the dude from Kingsman.
I thought he was really good.
He was amazing.
Yeah.
So I didn't see Bohemian Rhapsody, but who was better, him or Rami Malek as Freddie?
They're both really good. I don't know.
Pick one, Max. Take a side.
I kind of think Rami Malek was a little bit.
Wow.
Well, the other guy wouldn't commit to losing weight.
You mean gaining weight?
Gaining weight.
Oh.
Right? Like, he didn't gain any weight. Mike was saying that they call him a chubby little man or something, and he's not even chubby.
At one point, Elton's like, oh, like, how do I become a rock star, like a chubby ginger, whatever the line is. But like that Taron dude, he looks better than me with his shirt off, and I'm like, wow, there's a bit of a disconnect there.
Yeah, so I think, and Rami Malek, I feel like, had to transform a little bit more because Freddie Mercury has such an interesting look to him.
Sure.
Don't you just pop in bigger teeth? Stay skinny.
Put a mustache on? Yeah.
No,
all right.
I was swept away by Rami Malek had some great interviews for doing press for Bohemian Rhapsody. He was on Fresh Air, and he's a little over the top. He's a little theater kid, but he's like, so when I got the role, I moved to England. And he talks in this very kind of like pretentious way. He's like, I moved to England, and I walked the streets where what's his name?
Freddie.
Fred. I walked the streets where Freddie walked, and I made myself a half microphone stand, and I carried it with wherever I went. And on one hand, I was like, all right, settle down, buddy.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I was like, this guy's dedicated to the craft.
This method is amazing.
It kind of worked on me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought you were going to say he was kidding. Like, you thought he was pretentious, but then he's like, oh, I'm just kidding.
No.
Wow, that's
He
weird.
was totally all about it, yeah.
You got to respect the dedication to craft.
Yeah, and he had never sang or danced before, and he like took a lot of singing and dancing lessons. So.
They didn't use his voice, did they?
No, but I think there's some parts where like
they blend.
They blended a
to
little
make
bit.
it real.
But dude in Rocket Man does sing all the songs. It's not Elton.
Whoa.
He's not lip syncing.
Yeah.
Okay, but speaking of walking the streets of the UK, Max, this is our segue into our first topic of the day.
Yeah.
So Max last night sent out a Vox article. Headline reads, Gender stereotypes have been banned from British ads. What does that mean? The UK's advertising regulator gave agencies 6 months to eliminate stereotypes, and this is brackets, likely to cause harm or serious or widespread offense. So essentially, the idea is you can no longer put in a commercial a classic gender stereotype like I just said. The report was prompted by a series of widely reviled ads in the UK, including those for a protein world weight loss drink marketed with the tagline, "Are you Beachbody ready?" and a baby formula commercial that showed a girl growing up to be a ballerina and a boy growing up to be a mathematician. Also, Kate Upton's Game of War commercial. It also came after the ASA stepped in to penalize Gucci for unhealthily thin models in a 2016 ad campaign, and a more general public feeling of unease about the pernicious effects of advertising, particularly on children.
Let's say it's a laundry commercial.
Yeah.
Can you have a woman in it, like being like?
I think you can do gender-focused marketing. It just can't be like negative stereotypes.
Right.
I
So the
guess it
woman in the
depends
laundry commercial couldn't be in like a bikini. All my dirty clothes are being cleaned right now, fellas.
It's an interesting question, the laundry one. I don't know. Do you just having a man do it?
Yeah.
That's the way it is anyway. Like anytime you see a commercial here, there's always like a group of friends, and one's Asian, one's a black guy, and one's a white guy, and then the man is always like, when I'm looking after the kids, and he's always like in the kitchen doing something you would typically see the woman do, like maybe 15 years
So you're
ago.
saying that
it's already happened here in that way, but
without
I
being
think
regulated.
this is something different though.
What's interesting about this to me is that it's being sort of legislated. Like it's like a rule. So like, here you mentioned that, if you're going to be selling a car or something, you'll have a mixed couple because one that I for two reasons. One, I think marketers have become super savvy because they know that people, they want to see that because it obviously sort of is
there's a woke appeal to it.
100%. And like you're just reaching more people, more demographics who might buy your car. And the people who might feel disturbed by seeing a mixed couple aren't the sort of people you want buying your shit. Anyway, what is interesting about this, like I was saying, is that this will now be like legislated. Like it's enforceable, obviously, through some sort of like I don't know what the penalties would be from like whatever their version of the CRTC is.
Could you have like under this new mandate a commercial with a boy like going through his life and then he becomes a mathematician? If it doesn't include a girl at all, is it just the fact that in the typical commercial it would be like, here's a boy's dream, like I'm going to change the world through science, and then the girl's like, I'll change it through dance or being a waitress.
Right. Yeah, I to your point, yes, I think you can't do comparative gender stereotypes. So for instance, like I wouldn't even think, all mathematicians are boys, but when you juxtapose it to a girl being a ballerina, then you go, oh wait, that's weird. Why not make the girl the mathematician and the boy a dancer or whatever, or flip the stereotypes? It is subjective, and it gets to the idea too, like what are stereotypes in general? Usually there is some sort of basis. So like I think about this constantly. Like so like if girls play with dolls and boys want to throw a baseball around, let's say, which is like a typical stereotype. The question is that what they're naturally inclined to do, or do they do it because they see it everywhere? So like if you're a little girl and from the minute you're like 2 years old, you're watching Disney movies where the princess has to fall in love with the prince. So you're conditioned to sort of think
wearing
a
nice
way.
dress.
Exactly. So then it sort of like breeds this whole sort of like generation of young girls who think that way. It's like, oh, I need to get a husband, or I need to find my prince. Or if you're like if you're a young boy, it's like, oh, you grew up watching hockey with your dad, so you're like, I have to watch hockey, or I got to be like masculine. Sort of these things that are they inherent or are they learned?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's science that says that like girls and boys have like are dispositionally like will often go to one direction or another, on average, of course. And I think that's totally fine. That like boys and girls often have different set of interests on average. But also, then the big question is like, are we nudging them in a way? And I'm always really interested in like how culture nudges different groups and what governments can do about it. And this is kind of what we're talking about right now, when we're talking about like how involved does a government get in other people's life. And I think, and I'm always super interested, and you can go through, it's like, seatbelts in cars or smoking inside. It's like those are things that governments have done that go, we're taking some of the control out of the market, or like the free market. We're not allowing the free market just to sort of like decide what's best. We're actually going to intervene, and we're going to say, no, this is actually causing a greater harm, and we need to set some rules in place. And that's, I think, what's happening with this these new ad rules in the UK. I kind of like this experiment because I'm kind of interested to see what the results are. So not to say that like I totally know it's going to like make a better difference for a bunch of for young men and women who are viewing these ads, but I am curious to know what the effects are in 10 years if they do actually make a difference.
Yeah. See, what I find interesting though is that something like, say, smoking in buildings or seatbelts, that feels objective. That feels like, well, obviously if you don't wear a seatbelt, it can be harmful, and we've proven that smoking is harmful in health way. This feels subjective.
Well, I think it's objective in as much that you talk about rates of depression and anxiety amongst young people. Like those are real objective facts that are going through the roof right now. So our current
society contributes to that. And so this is a step towards it. Because some people would say, this is one person's version of society. there's basically like say like a liberal leaning gender neutral outlook
Yeah.
is now pushing an agenda to a society where there's a lot of people that would say, you know, this is like the Trumpism thing, where they would say, wait a second. Like, we kind of like the way it was before, where everybody had a defined role, and et cetera, et cetera. I'm literally not speaking for myself. I'm saying what other people might say in response to this. They would push back on this because they would say, wait a second, that's not my vision of sort of like a better future. Now, what I find interesting is, like, is there more people that think like us that go, yeah, of course we should have the woman as the mathematician or little girl becoming a mathematician, and people should be able to do what they want on the spectrum and not be nudged a certain way. But I think there's going to be a certain segment that go, you're imposing your ideals and your view of society on us as a whole. This has kind of been the issue all along with the way voting rights have gone and Brexit and obviously the election in the States and this sort of conservative movement in Canada as well.
Yeah, I'd bet that the reason for the law has more to do with mental health than anything else. Because I think, like, when we're talking about, how gender norms are enforced, or like body, like the way bodies are presented.
The sort of societal consensus of what is beautiful, what is not.
Yeah, and this is why we need to step in. Is that because, like, we don't trust advertisers to do the right thing? Really.
Yeah. Like, the societal consensus is harmful.
Yeah, because Jonathan Haidt, who wrote this book, Coddling of the American Mind, he's talked a lot about how rates of depression and suicide for young girls, like age 12 to 17, are way higher than they ever been, and that, I think, in part has to do with advertising, but also social media too. And this is actually the next thing I've been thinking about. Is just like, okay, how if we want to make sure that sort of like the best values are being presented to young people, like, how do you moderate like YouTubers or influencers and stuff? Because that's this whole other marketplace that's completely unregulated.
Sure.
Right now they're able to kind of get their hands over the big agency marketing companies, but there's this whole other set of influencers that also have a huge voice.
Yeah, I also think too, like, when I asked, like, nature nurture earlier, like, I think, like, you talked about advertisers and the way they present sort of life, and then we sort of follow what we think, oh, that's life. It's like, actually, that's not life, but that's an advertiser's presentation of what it is. This kind of goes back to 30s, 40s, 50s. It's kind of insidious, like Easy Bake Oven, and it's a girl, and it's like the boy has the rocket launching ship and all that stuff. That's like advertisers selling and sort of it becoming this inherent thing over 60,
because
70
that's
years.
how life was at the time. It was most of the men went to work and most of the women stayed home and they were homemakers.
So advertising reflected the
It
society.
was preparing them for what they were likely to do.
Right.
Right.
And then I guess as things change and evolve, like, you know what I mean? Like, obviously the sexual revolution in the 60s and sort of like liberation and women's rights, as that stuff started changing, that obviously shook people who had been used to living a certain way, like all the way from, the 20s were pretty roaring, but then things started to settle down after the war and become very conservative and buttoned down. And I guess the question is, like, do advertisers reflect the people, or are they influencing the people? Like, is it a mirror, or is it like a...
Oh, I think the advertisers are seeing that the times are changing and they're trying to hop on board. Like, this seems very late, because it seems like commercials are already headed this way.
Right.
And if you take one step out of line, even if your intentions are good, you're fucked. Like, look at that Pepsi commercial or that Gillette commercial, which tried its hardest to really be like, because I'm a man. It still got ripped apart, and that was trying to be like as positive as possible.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if you try or not. If you do a commercial where, like, Kate, what's the girl with the big jugs name?
Kate Upton.
I meant to say boobies. But if Kate Upton's dancing around in a commercial eating a cheeseburger, she's probably going to get ripped apart once it gets on the internet, and they're going to have to disable the comment section. So
Right.
I think this law is just like following suit with how society is going. I don't think they're like paving new roads or anything.
So one of the commercials in question right now that might be taken down is a Philadelphia cheese ad. Basically, there's I think a really dopey dude in the kitchen trying to... The ad in question shows two first-time fathers who get so distracted by eating cheese that their babies end up on a conveyor belt of the Philadelphia on toast. A full 32 complaints have been made about the scandalous and grossly unfair portrayal of male ineptitude. So I don't know if the Brits are just being funny right now and being sarcastic with complaining about it. But yeah, it does lead to the question. It's like, what will be banned, or what people will complain about, and then what will have to be taken off the air. And that's the subjective part.
Well, that's it, and it's just like I guess all society really is it's kind of like a consent. It's like majority rules. That's what elections are. That is like sort of how we decide what we're going to do as a society. And why we're in such an interesting time right now is because there's kind of two opposing forces, and I don't know if it's 50-50. It's like kind of like this sort of like things have been going a certain way for the last decade, which is like enlightenment, sort of human rights, being kind, fellow man. And then there's this sort of been this pushback with Trump being elected that is kind of this pushback that goes, obviously make America great again. You know what it was like before? Let's get back to that when a man was a man and a woman was a woman and everything was easy and simple and defined. So it's like you have these two sort of forces sort of trying to be going, no, let's ascend to this utopian sort of society where we accept everybody. And then you have this other sort of group saying, no, like what was wrong with the way it was before? And I'm very fascinated to see where it's going to net out. Like, I don't know if this pushback is temporary and then we continue ascending to sort of like this commonality and realizing we have more in common than our differences, or if it's actually this wave of sort of pushback will actually push everything back to the way it was, where it's like, know your place. Like, let's not tiptoe around things. It's like stereotypes exist for a reason, and we're just going to accept it, and let's not lie about the reality of situations. I don't know what side's going to sort of net out and win.
Do you feel like you give into stereotypes or anything? Or like growing up, you watched commercials and were like, I'm going to play with trucks now or something?
I didn't have a truck collection, but I think we're all susceptible to stereotypes and what we sort of see and what we're taught and like the sort of the environment we grew up in. But then it's like, is it on us to sort of, everyone uses that word woke and a lot of times in sort of a derogatory way, but like, is it on us to sort of ascend from that, have critical thought, have independent thought, like whether you grew up with religion in your life or maybe thinking that, a certain way of life, that the way that other people live is wrong or whatever. It's like, how do you sort of break out of that and form your own views and sort of a more, like, I'm a humanist, man. Like, so even if I have stereotypical thoughts where I go, ooh, like that group of people seem to act a certain way, I try to shake that thought and go, okay, why did I think that? Is it true? What's even the evidence that it's true? Was it like something in a movie I saw once that informs the way that I think? I don't know. I try to sort of like think my way through all of that stuff if I have like a knee-jerk reaction. That's how I approach it. Where do you find you, Neto?
Well, for me, I feel like growing up, I always was given cars and trucks as gifts, always given tools as gifts. My dad was obsessed with the Maple Leafs, the Blue Jays, and I hate all of those things. Like, I never wanted to drive a car. I never wanted to be handyman. I never wanted to learn how to ice skate. Still haven't. Baseball I hated, and I just kind of went my own way and got into basketball and comedy. Mm-hmm. So it's weird. Like, I don't like stereotypes because it's really embarrassing for me when my wife's driving me around everywhere and everyone's like, well, the man should be driving, or when my wife mows the lawn for me or something like that, because I just want to sit on the couch and eat bonbons and watch reality TV. So I'm bonbons. That's a Married with Children reference. But I'm honestly, it really is embarrassing for me because I am the least, like, I'm going to
Though I
grill
will say
some birds.
The things that you're into are also very, very male-dominated things. You're into comedy, which is way more male-focused, and I wonder, is there why? And this is just a question. Like, why are more males, just statistically speaking, interested in comedy?
Well,
and is there something with the male disposition that is attracted to that, or is that a society thing that's been enforced? Like, I don't know.
Well, there's a certain theory that everything we do is to get sex. So, and you're really are
you're
told.
talking about a revolution.
Maybe that could be an influential thing because everyone always told you.
You're talking about the revolution, baby. He means evolutionary, meaning like attracting mates, is what you're saying. Like,
yeah.
Right. Well, everyone says like, "Oh, a girl likes a funny guy. If you make her laugh, she'll love you." And
someone said that to him when he was 9, and then he went into a room like A Beautiful Mind and started putting together comedy and all that. No, but I know what you mean.
But that's what every guy is told. So maybe I was influenced that way, and then I just rejected all the other things that I knew I was maybe not going to be good at.
I have a hard time. Do you guys ever? Do you have any like nieces or anything like that? Like because I have a 11-year-old and a 7-year-old niece, and anytime they're dressed up for some occasion, I kind of like, oh, you look pretty, but I'm like, no, can't say that. Do you guys tell young girls they look pretty?
No, I wouldn't comment on appearance.
Yeah.
I say you look hot. But see, and then it gets laughing. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't get a laugh.
The girl guides are walking by and
Yeah.
Shane's like, so
Hot. Did you say hot and not?
Nice try. What's the next topic?
Yeah, jeez Louise. The next topic is...
Was that coherent at all?
I don't know. I mean,
I
I
zoned
guess
out, man. That was for the listeners.
the listeners will be able to tell us.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
Yeah. Okay, we started heavy, so let's move on to a story out of the Hollywood Reporter about... There's a film out right now called Men in Black International, starring Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson. It is obviously a reboot of the very popular Men in Black series with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. There was 3 of those films from back in the day. The reason this story is interesting is because this movie came out. It was a huge flop / failure.
When did it come out? I don't even know.
See, that's a failure of marketing and advertising. I think like last week, maybe.
What?
I had no idea it was out.
And I'm a huge Men in Black fan.
Well, here's the thing, and the advertising was all over the NBA playoffs. They would like Chris Paul would have eyes in the back of his head because he's a great passer, like as a point guard. But so it was like he was an alien, or Anthony Davis was an alien. Did you guys not see any of these commercials?
No.
Nope.
So anyway, they were advertising the shit out of it. Nobody went and saw this film. I'm sure for a million different reasons. Like, they're trying to sort of dissect why, but why this story is interesting is basically they have this story saying like what went wrong, the rewrites, and sort of the infighting. So I'll quickly break this down. There's 2 producers, this producing team. One of them is like a Steven Spielberg confidant, and then you have the director. I think it's Gary. I can't remember his name. Anyways, he's the guy that did Straight Outta Compton, and then you have the 2 stars, obviously Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, and they have this script that they think is like great. Everybody's excited about it. The actors get involved because this script is great. They get the money from Sony. They decide to go ahead and reboot this film. The 2 producers were doing rewrites as the film was going. So they have their script, they go into shooting, and I guess as the film's unfolding, and you never really want to make anything this way, they're changing things. They're sort of changing different things. Apparently the original script was going to be a little bit more topical. It was going to
So
be...
the producers are rewriting stuff?
Yes.
Not the director?
No, but the director wouldn't write it anyways. You'd have writers, but the producers, I guess, were in on the original script, so they felt a certain amount of ownership. And the original script, I guess, also was a little bit more topical and relevant, meaning it was going to sort of be a commentary on immigration, because obviously you have these aliens coming in from all around the galaxy to Earth, and the Men in Black sort of police this. So that element, I guess, gets stripped away. I haven't seen the film, so I don't quite know. And then they were changing sort of the script constantly. So then Chris Hemsworth, Tessa Thompson, the stars, they bring in their own dialogue writers because I guess they're not feeling what the new dialogue is. They're like, well, we had this one script, now we have this other script. I guess the director is fighting hard with the producers. It's this big expose about why it all went wrong. And Sony, who's paying for this, I guess they were absentee. Usually the studio would come in and say, okay, listen, either the producers are in charge or the director's in charge, and that's the person who has the last say. But I guess they kind of stayed out of the whole thing. So I read this whole sort of piece about why everything went wrong. And by the way, whenever a film of this magnitude that costs this much money doesn't deliver, there's always going to be some blaming and finger pointing.
Yeah.
The producers, this producing team, which was interesting, so at the end of the article, they're like, update 435. It's them basically defending themselves. Like, they're like, this journalist from the Hollywood Reporter didn't even reach out to us for comment. Whenever a film like this happens, it's always going to be collaborative. And there's as a producer, there's a million different sort of competing interests that need to like be looked after. Yeah. So if it's like certain money people that are financing the film, it's like Sony, and then I guess there was a couple other companies. It's like they have certain concerns about a script. Well, we actually have to go in and we have to address that as producers. And anyway, they sort of defended themselves. The reason I bring this story up, and that was a long sort of explanation of why we're talking about this, is can you make good creative things when there's too many cooks? We're talking about like sort of like collaboration in creative on a large scale, and do things tend to sort of fall apart? I think making a movie is hard anyway, but whenever you hear stuff like this, you're just like, this is a mess.
Well, there's a movie like American History X that was just littered with problems. The director and the studio conflicted the entire way, so much so that the director took his name off it and then wanted to have it replaced with Alan Smithy, which has become like a popular...
It's the famous, yeah.
Who's the director of that movie?
Oh, geez, I forget his name right now.
That's the Ed Norton movie, though, right?
Yes. Yeah. And but that movie turned out great. Like, that movie's like very effective and amazing. And then there's a movie like Apocalypse Now where... what's his name?
Francis Ford Coppola.
Francis Ford Coppola just went with his own guns and like took like 5 years to make it.
Went over budget.
And again, it ended up turning out amazing. And then there's other movies where it just ends up horribly. So it's kind of a crapshoot no matter which way you look at it.
Here's how I feel. I think you just need a singular vision. So if it's Francis Ford Coppola being insane on Apocalypse Now, at least he's driving the car. The problem is when nobody knows who the boss is. And maybe you find this, I don't know, in music collaboration, Max. But like, it's like like there's that famous saying, compromise killed the band. If everybody has a voice, you end up coming with something mediocre.
But there's also another saying called teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah.
That's my favorite, yeah.
So I was listening to this podcast, this guy named Adam Grant, who is an expert in like organizational behavior. He was on Sam Harris's podcast the other day, and he has his own show as well. Really smart, interesting, enlightened dude. And he was saying, Sam Harris asked him, "Is like, what is like the main problem when you go talk to a business or an organization that they deal with? Like, what's like the first flag you see?" And he says, "It's when they give a group of people a task to do when it'd be better served for one person to figure it out." And I was like, oh, that's such an interesting insight. When you have too many people in charge of making a decision, when it's better just one person does it. Or the inverse of that, too. It's like sometimes you give one person a duty when actually you need 10 people to figure that thing out. So kind of figuring out what issues are best solved by either a singular vision or a group. And I think when it comes to any kind of decision making, it's like you kind of have to ask yourself, it's like, is there too many cooks in the kitchen, or do we need more voices? Because I think, for instance, like if you're making a record, you'll see a lot of records that flop because like the songwriter or the band goes, no, this is our vision, and the label's like, can we give you some notes, or maybe you could work with this other producer, or maybe we could try some co-writes, and the band goes, no, this is our vision. And in instances where it fails, it's like the band clearly should have asked for more voices, should have had more opinions. But then sometimes it's like, no, the band or the director, whoever, like actually knows exactly what they want and ends up doing it perfectly. Like, I talked about this Billie Eilish example, where Billie on a previous episode, where Billie Eilish and her brother refused any outside help, and they end up making a transcendent record. And
it's like Pet Sounds with the Beach Boys.
Yeah,
right?
because it was Brian Wilson's vision. So it's like that is the question, though. It's like, when do you get notes? How do you get notes?
You never know till it's amazing or it's a piece of shit.
Well, I think there's something to that too.
And in hindsight, you always see it perfectly.
Yeah,
right?
So
no, but here's the question though. It's because in order to make anything, usually, unless it is you're making a record in your basement or something, specifically to make especially to make a movie, someone has to pay for it. So the question is, how much
and movies are different than making a record.
But no, but a record can matter too, though.
No, but the money involved makes it different, because I think that's what makes movies different.
And a movie's way more collaborative.
Movies are way more collaborative, and the budgets are so much bigger.
So movies are super collaborative. But like when Quentin Tarantino makes a movie, I guarantee you nobody tells Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
He gets the final say. Mm-hmm. But I bet you a lot of people are paying for that movie that aren't Quentin. My question is, when you're paying for something, whether you're the record label paying for Billie Eilish's record with her brother and all that studio time, and they're building a safe place for them to create something great, or you're handing over a film, like a $100 million film, to a director or producers, it's like, how much say do the money people get in the overall product? Or is the whole part of being like a patron or being like, I'm investing in the arts, to be like, here's the bag of money, come back with what you come back with?
Well, the thing is, these guys that are investors go, do you know other projects I've been involved with? It's like the reason why I'm so fucking successful is that like I was the person who made the little tweak in The Notebook, or I was the person that did the little tweet in whatever, Shawshank Redemption. I have the magic touch. I know how to read a fucking script. And that's why they pay me the big bucks. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. But that's what I mean. They want to be the creatives.
Yeah.
And so at what point do they step away? Or is it helpful?
You got to work it out beforehand. That's the thing. You're like, I'm the money guy. I'm going to be giving you notes. Or there's a thing called Final Cut, where the director just gets to supersede any notes and just do whatever they want. There's like, 20 directors in the industry who have that, like P.T. Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, Spielberg.
Speaking of Final Cut, Ben and Black International had two versions. They had a version that the producers wanted and the version that the director wanted. They tested them both, and the one that is now out is the producer's version.
The producer's version, interesting.
Yeah.
I heard stories like this, funny enough, about Iron Man, where every day they had to kind of like have a script doctor come in and basically start with a blank page, fuck around with the script, and then have Robert Downey Jr. make up his own lines, and it turned out amazing.
Yeah.
Really?
Sometimes it can work with chaos, but I think more often than not, it doesn't. I mean, there's a million movies that get made every year that no one's ever even heard of. Like,
Depends. Like Judd Apatow films, like he tends to not have like a hard and fast script, and it's very collaborative, and
Yep.
people tend to like those, and they tend to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the issue with this particular movie, it felt kind of chaotic. Where it's like if you're going to a movie with Judd Apatow or even Tarantino. I was listening to a podcast with somebody who had been in a Tarantino or a Scorsese movie. It was Scorsese. Who was it? Oh, it was Adam Grant. No, Adam. Who's the dude in Parks and Rec?
Oh, Adam Scott.
Adam Scott. He was on Bill Simmons' podcast the other day, and Simmons was asking him, like, what makes Apatow good, what makes Scorsese good. And he said, oh, Scorsese's actually very collaborative. He really wants your input. Same thing with Apatow. It's very like team oriented, but I guess it really depends on like what the issue with this movie was that shit was happening in the moment where people didn't know what protocol was.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yes.
It's like if you know that like this is how we do it. Whether it's like it's my way or the highway or everybody gets a seat at the table, whatever it is, people need structure. And when things are happening in a chaotic way in the moment, that's I think when things can get fucked up.
Right.
But you're right though, Shane. Is that retrospect is so easy to
You
evaluate.
you reverse engineer the narrative depending on how it turns out.
Have you guys ever seen the clip of David O. Russell on the set of I Heart Huckabees losing his shit?
I've heard about it. Would it remind me?
Well, he's just like Lily Tomlin's like giving him a little bit of attitude or something. He's like, "You fucking cunt! This is my whole life, you bitch!" And he knocks everything off the desk, and like it almost hits Jason Schwartzman. And then there's another scene where Lily Tomlin's in a car with Dustin Hoffman, and Lily's like, "You fucking son of a bitch! I fucking hate you!" And Dustin Hoffman's just like, "Calm down, calm down."
Oh, is she just mimicking the director?
No, they're both volatile personalities.
This was off camera.
This like cameras kept rolling.
The camera's rolling. They're supposed to be starting the scene, but it's just caught, and then it got released to YouTube. And then I was listening. Lily said she'd work with him in a heartbeat because he's such an amazing director again. So
Oh, wow.
They're still friends. And he famously got punched in the face by George Clooney, David O. Russell did on the set of Three Kings.
That's awesome.
And then I was listening to Dax Shepard talk about he was like watching him work behind the scenes on the set. And how he works is while you're moving around, like on the set of Silver Linings Playbook, Bradley Cooper's walking around and need to touch a book. He's like, "No, Bradley, touch that book. No, sit down, get up, say this line, say this." And he'll talk almost the entire time, even while you're doing your dialogue. And then they'll like ADR and replace it and shit. Wow. So he works in complete chaos. But since the movies turn out so well, minus I Heart Huckabees, which did not, that people are willing to tolerate it. So it all depends on your reputation. And I think the odds of the end product turning out well. And I think because Men in Black is considered such a juggernaut, they're like, fuck, this is going to do gangbusters regardless. It doesn't even, who cares how good it is?
Yeah, but I think because the industry is so volatile and you have to keep producing, like he's a rarity where he can be an asshole and keep getting the business.
I don't know about this day and age, man. Working conditions are changing, man.
No, I know that's what I'm saying, but I feel like any job, a director has to be charming and easy to work with, and it has to be like the ambassador for the movie to a degree, you know, and so I feel and you see a lot of successful directors that are just like, Linklater. He seemed like a laid back dude. Like a lot of guys are, I think, really great at collaborating.
Well, here's the thing,
and that's how they keep getting the work,
but
and getting the best out of their actors too.
So there's this sort of thought that like for years we've always put up with volatile genius, whatever it is. If you're in finance, I don't care if you work at like wherever you work. People put up with the volatile genius because they go, well, the work justifies maybe like the verbal abuse. Mm-hmm. We've entered an era now, like in this, I felt like this happened with the Magic Johnson story when, you know, there was that big hit piece on ESPN about how Magic basically was a tyrant to some employees. Some people look at that story and they go, was Magic a tyrant or was he just a tough boss? Have employees become too sensitive? So I'm wondering, as we move forward, is sort of like the age of a really difficult, demanding, volatile, say, boss. Is that even acceptable anymore, or is that like an HR issue? Like, does everybody have to operate at a certain level now, including a David O. Russell, before? And now people are like, no, that shit doesn't fly anymore.
I think that I was listening to Conan talk about this like exact issue. It's like I think being a good boss means that like you're firm but fair, and I think even though we're like living in an era where like millennials are sensitive or whatever, I still think people respect a boss that's firm, as long as they're fair and like a leader of people, right? Like I think those are the qualities that.
Yeah, it's hard to command respect when you're like demanding respect. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
Or when you're just like flat out an asshole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some people it works for fear-based. For me, it does not.
No, not at all. Do you think bosses do you think they can yell at employees still? Or do you think that's like, it just can't happen?
I don't think you can.
No, you can't. Which I think is, and this almost brings us back to the sort of mental health thing about society. This is a good place to ascend to ultimately. But then there's certain people that go, no one has any discipline anymore. Kids are soft. You can't even yell at an employee. You know, and it's interesting to see that point of view because I'm like, actually, we're getting to a better place by sort of changing the rules, you know. But for the old guard, they can't understand it. It's like, wait a second, I own a car wash and I can't yell at the guy washing the car anymore? It's like, well, no, not really. And it's like, well, I fucking own it.
Yeah, and you'd probably just say, well, that guy's maybe not the best boss because there's better ways to get work out of your employees.
Sure.
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Yeah, let's keep going.
All right.
Well, I was going to ask about
jump in.
just because it kind of relates to both. But there was a time where you had to direct a commercial.
Yeah.
Where it was like a sexy guy. Sexy guy has been mentioned.
Turn on the sexy guy. The guy horn. Sexy guy comes in.
Shirts up, boys.
It seems like the fire alarm is going off here where we're recording at E1 right now.
What is going on? Is this like a...
Have you ever been through a fire drill here?
Never haven't. It's 10:02. I wonder.
This has to be a fire drill.
Yeah. Fuck.
Do we cut and come back?
Is this a to be continued episode?
What happens here?
Fire drill. Well, how deep into the pot are we?
We're at 47, and we never hit the Danny Green thing. Man, dear listeners, you've never heard this. People are starting to file out of this building right now. A bunch of people are coming out of offices. Everyone's kind of giggling. Oh, actually, people are dancing now. This is very weird.
You know what, guys? That's the end of the episode. Oh. Let's see what the announcement is.
People love fire alarms, though.
Attention. The fire alarm system has been activated. Evacuate the building using nearest exit. Elevators are out of service.
Mike on Much can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Mike on Much. You can subscribe to the show on any platform that has podcasts. Spotify, do it.